Perfect. All right, good afternoon, everyone. If we can go ahead and mute ourselves so we can get started. My name is Tina Naragi Pormacone. I am the co-chair for the Justice for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Collective. This organization was founded earlier this year by a large group of individuals who saw a need for conversations like the ones we're having tonight to be had and change to be enacted. JEDI was created with the mission to dismantle the barriers that have inhibited the growth of our profession and our community. And we're excited to end the year with our first event. I wanted to remind everyone that our survey that was linked with the event is still active. We will be sharing the results of these surveys through social media and using it to inform what topics and conversations need to be had for future events. I also want to take this opportunity to let everyone know that we are recording the keynote portion of the forum, but we will stop recording when we break out into our small groups in order to allow for a more open and comfortable dialogue. Lastly, I want to thank Kimberly and Jason, as well as all the discussion leaders tonight for the time they've invested in helping us organize the forum. I also want to thank Houston NOMA for partnering with us in this event. And with that, I would like to pass it off to Angela Gilmore to introduce our speakers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Gilmore. I serve on the JEDI committee. And I am pleased to welcome Kim Dowdell and Jason Pugh here tonight to speak to us about leadership and advocacy. Not going to take very long. Kim Dowdell is a principal at Gensler in Chicago, and she is the, I'm sorry. Oh, HOK in Chicago, sorry. She is the 2019-2020 outgoing president of NOMA. Congratulations, Kim. And I have Jason Pugh, who is a he's an associate project architect and urban planner at Gensler. And he is the 2021-2022 incoming president of NOMA. So with that, again, thank you for joining us, and we will hand it over to the two of you.
All right, thank you, Angie, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you. So Jason and I, we have the privilege of doing our first joint keynote, so we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to share my screen and then jump right into it. All right, can everyone see my screen? Yes? Okay, is it full screen? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so again, it's a delight for Jason and I to be here. Jason, I know you're on, so do you want to say hello? You'll hear from him a little bit later in the presentation, but just wanted to make sure we started out together. So hello from Kim, and then Jason with your
hello from Chicago. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this discussion.
All right, great. Okay, so jumping in, I usually do just a little bit of an intro. Yes, this looks like a resume, but it's actually just a way for me to kind of show people how, you know, your career doesn't always necessarily kind of go from one point to the next in a straight line. So I had a lot of different detours, one of which was studying government for graduate school after getting my my Bachelor of Architecture. And so I've done a lot of different things in architecture and real estate and teaching. But you know, my journey really began in Detroit, Michigan, which is kind of how a lot of this, you know, sort of architecture and advocacy and leadership started. So, so this is an image from Detroit before I was born, several decades before I was born, the Hudson's department store in downtown Detroit, Michigan. And this building was sort of a beacon for many, many decades in Detroit, you know, sort of showcasing the city's strength. And at a certain point in time, it was the second largest department store in the world. And this department store, you know, everyone who had sort of come along before me and my family and otherwise would talk about the grandeur of the Hudson's department store. However, just due to economic decline in Detroit that I think a lot of people already know about, you know, Hudson's department store closed its doors the year that I was born. So when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s in Detroit, this was the scene, you know, from my street view around that time when I was around 11, when I decided I wanted to be an architect because I wanted to fix this particular building. You can see it's, you know, it's still the, you know, grand building that it was, but sort of a ghost of its former self with the broken windows and the boarded up, you know, facade. So, so that was my view, but what really inspired me to want to become an architect in the first place, to kind of, you know, change the situation that, you know, I saw in front of me, thinking that's what architects did. We do work on this kind of stuff, but it's just, you know, there's a whole larger team that's involved that I later learned. So a couple of years later, that happened. So I obviously did not get to work on the Hudson's department store at all. But you know, the sort of seed was planted for me to go into architecture, to really, you know, try to understand how conditions like this, you know, happen, and what I could do as an architect and you know, sort of beyond architecture to work on that. And so I did my thesis as an undergrad on basically what happened to Detroit and how could architecture respond. And I won't go into the details of the thesis, but a couple of highlights that that I learned. You know, the imagery on the left hand side of the screen shows the Detroit neighborhood in the 40s versus one in the early 2000s, and you can see that there's a erosion of the built fabric. And I wanted to understand specifically how this happened and how to prevent it from happening. And so that's when I, you know, got you know, more of an education around issues of planning and zoning, and I learned about redlining specifically. And so the image on the upper right is a residential security map, which, you know, basically shows redlining, where investments are not recommended in the areas that are red, which unfortunately largely correlated to communities of color. And so to learn more about sort of systemic disinvestment, and, you know, basically what causes the kind of erosion that happened in Detroit and many other cities, including Houston, I encourage you to take a look at The Color of Law. And so I'll leave that there, but just a good recommendation. And one of the things that, you know, this translates into is inequity from a financial perspective. And so, you know, there's often questions about, well, why are, you know, communities of color so blighted? You know, why do they lose buildings? Why are the buildings, are they not kept up? And so to put that in greater context, I tend to show this racial wealth inequality graph that, you know, basically outlines where, you know, a white family in America, the median household wealth is around 120,000 at this point, but for a Latino or Latinx family, it's about 1,600, and for an African American family or Black family, it's 1,200. And so that, you know, that does speak to some of the wealth inequality that is, you know, that was created as a result of, you know, lack of access to a strong real estate market, you know, over decades. And so that's something that kind of, I think, contextualizes part of some of the injustices that we're seeing, at least from an economic perspective. Obviously, there are other issues as well at play, but this is just some context. Additional context in terms of visualizing this inequity in the city of Chicago, which is where both Jason and I live. You know, the south side of Chicago, which I think most people know, is predominantly African American and Latinx, generally people of color, and the north side, so the top part of these maps, are predominantly white areas. And so when we look at, you know, the wealth gap, you know, there's a strong correlation to unemployment, which you'll see on the far right, and then also food deserts, which, you know, does play into the health gap. And I think what's most troubling is the health gap, which translates into life expectancy. So, you know, the darker red areas are seen as having kind of an average life expectancy of 60 years versus the lighter areas, which have a life expectancy of 90 years. So we're talking about, you know, a 30-year gap in terms of life expectancy based on, you know, your zip code. And, you know, unfortunately, it translates into your race just based on where people tend to live. So these are some of the things that I think are really problematic that as I want people to understand, you know, in a pretty, you know, important way as we think about our role as architects. And so our duty as an architect is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, the entire public. The buildings that we design are meant to shelter everyone safely and to the extent possible to create delight. And that was a part of an article that I wrote for Architect Magazine earlier this year, when we talk about how, you know, as an architect, we are to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, we don't necessarily specify what that public means. And so by the entire public, that, you know, that points specifically to the South Side of Chicago, it points specifically to, you know, the under-resourced communities in Houston and Detroit and New York and other places that are suffering from, you know, just great inequality. So as architects, we must actively protect. You know, that's kind of the major takeaway. And so, you know, asking ourselves what we can do to be a part of the solution so that, you know, we can start to close those health and wealth gaps that we see in our cities, in our neighborhoods. But action must begin within. And so that's kind of getting back to what specifically we're looking to do within NOMA, what we've been doing in the last few years. So first, looking at the context of our existing disparities, you know, on the left-hand side, it shows the US population. On the right-hand side, it shows the percentage of licensed architects. There are 116,000 licensed architects in the United States. There are actually more lawyers in the state of California for a sense of scale, but just in terms of just our profession, we have 116,000 approximately. And, you know, our numbers are not great in terms of, you know, representation of women. It's getting better. It's certainly better than it has been in the past, but we still have a ways to go. For the Latinx community, African American community, Asian community, and Native American community, yeah, the disparities are there. It's less so in the Asian American community, being somewhat closer to that of the U.S. population. But you know, where we're seeing the largest disparity is the African American community, which represents 13% of the U.S. population, but only 2% of architects, and then Black women represent you know, far less than 1%, so 0.04%. And so you can kind of take a closer look at that at the website that NOMA has recently adopted, but has been around for a long time, the Director of African American Architects. So if you visit www.blackarchitect.us, you can take a look at, you know, specifically the, you know, the Black architects are in this directory by state. But the number that we have at this point is 2,373. So if you do the math and you know, divide that by 116,000, it's around 2%. It has been 2% for the last 50 years. And of that number, so that's the total number. The number for women specifically is 500. And you know, for Black women who are licensed to practice architecture in the U.S., there's so few of us that we actually know our number in terms of like when we became licensed, our kind of number in the full spectrum of all Black women. So I'm number 295 out of 500. And so that just kind of brings to mind a couple of thoughts, reflections on the importance of diversity and inclusion. I took a screenshot of this last year, and I tend to show these in my talks to, well, this one particular screenshot about how Stanford was looking to, you know, have their artificial intelligence Institute for Humanity, or for human-centered artificial intelligence to represent humanity broadly, but they forgot to actually include a Black faculty member. And you know, that's not to say that they have any ill will or whatever, but the point is, someone was missing from that room to say, hey, you forgot this like pretty large aspect of humanity, you know, those representing the African diaspora, if you will. And so, you know, that just kind of goes to the point of having to be very mindful of thinking about, you know, not just your own perspective, but thinking about, you know, if you're in a room and someone's missing, like you have to speak up, and that's part of, you know, our work as advocates for others and obviously for ourselves. Diversity and inclusion is super important for a number of reasons, but diverse teams are really going to be more effective at doing their job than homogenous teams. And then also inclusion is important, because if you have a diverse set of people, but not everyone has, you know, the same level of agency, then that's also a missed opportunity. So I talk about diversity a lot, because if we want to truly move the needle on a lot of the problems that we see in our society, you know, we have to be, you know, mindful of where perspectives might be missing, and diversity really helps to improve upon that. So if you would like to learn more about diversity and the importance of it, if you need to make the case for diversity, which you shouldn't have to, but if you need to do that, there's a great book called The Difference by Scott Page that talks about how the power of diversity creates better groups, firms, schools, and societies. And it's not just about race and ethnicity. There are lots of different types of diversity. So just wanted to flag that and make sure that we're thinking about the many different ways that we all walk in the world. So just in the American context, diversity is happening by 2045, according to the Brookings Institute. The majority of people in the US will be people of color. And so we're going to need different language around minority and majority and all that. But 2045 is not very long from now. So just wanted to say that out loud so that we can kind of keep that in mind as we think about what the future of our cities will be, especially as they become more diverse. And then in terms of density, US cities right now total have about 300 million people, but by 2050, they should have closer to 400 million people. And so as we think about our cities becoming more dense and more diverse, I think it's really incumbent upon us as leaders in the built environment to think about how can we create more harmonious spaces for a more diverse and dense set of locations. And this particular map shows obviously there's the US that's going to continue to grow, but there's an increasing number of megacities that we're going to start to see pop up in the global south. So there are going to be global opportunities for us as architects to get involved in creating just better cities that that reflect the diversity of not just our nation, but obviously the world. So just putting that on your radar. So there's going to be a lot more RFPs happening across the globe, and especially sort of in places that we haven't typically seen them. But in general, I mean, I love to talk about cities. I've lived in a lot of different cities at this point in my life, and just the density, the vibrancy, the culture, the people, it's something that's really driven me. And so that's why my mission is to improve the quality of life for people living in cities. So oftentimes, when I ask myself if I want to get involved with something, my true north, or the kind of driving question is, well, will this help improve the quality of life for people living in cities? And so, when the opportunity to lead NOMA came up, that was part of the kind of calculus there, like, will this help improve cities? And I think it will over time. And that's why I'm all in for NOMA. This is like my acceptance speech a couple years ago. And I think most people know at this point that my platform for my presidency has been all in for NOMA, which stands for Access, Leadership, and Legacy, but also welcomes all people to join NOMA, because again, diversity is really important. But access is really about creating greater access to the profession. Leadership is about fostering leadership opportunities for a wider array of people, and legacy is about celebrating the contributions of our members and making sure that their legacy can live beyond them. And so I'm just going to spend a few moments talking about some of the programming that corresponds to those three areas. I think a lot of people know and love NOMA Project Pipeline, which is our summer camp for middle school and high school students. Although we do have, in some cases, programming throughout the year. In fact, our Houston NOMA chapter does a great job with that program. And then every year, the NOMA Student Design Competition is a big hit at the annual conference. I think we have close to 40 schools that compete every single year for, sort of bragging rights, if you will, for the Student Design Competition. And then a new program is the NOMA Foundation Fellowship Program, which basically matches new graduates with firms who want to host them. And this year we had to switch gears a little bit because we planned on having in-person fellowships, but obviously we had to go virtual, and fewer firms were hiring. So we had to retool things to accommodate the, what is 2020. So definitely appreciate all the firms, and some of you are represented here, but many of the firms that stepped up to help us host these fellows. Leadership programming, it constitutes a lot of different things, but a couple of examples are, chapter innovation. For example, I often flag the NOMA Nashville coloring book, where, they actually have on Amazon right now a coloring book that you can buy that showcases the, the work of of minority architects from the NOMA Nashville chapter that, it's a great way to engage kids. And it's also a fundraiser for their chapter. NOMA Houston has, really innovative things that they do all the time as well. So hats off to you all. And then just, serving on the NOMA national or local leadership boards, it's a way to help, develop leaders. And I think that's been, very helpful for me in my career. And I've seen it, really help others as well. And then the annual NOMA conferences, it's just the highlight of the year for so many of us. And even when we had to go virtual this year, it was just a great way to kind of connect and, of course, get our CEUs. Thank you, Angie, for always making sure we get our CEUs and HSWs for those of us who are licensed. But also just, it's a way to engage with mentors and mentees and just, be reconnected to the NOMA family, as we call ourselves. And then legacy, there are a lot of different things that we can do with this and we are doing, but a few that I'll highlight are the Phil Freelon Professional Design Awards, which the awards program has been around for decades, but we recently renamed it in honor of Phil Freelon, a longtime member when he passed last year. The Betty and Mort Marshall Scholarship Fund is, another way to honor the legacy of a passed on member, but also to support HBCU students. And then one of our foundation fellows, the fellowship was named in honor of another member who's passed on, Kenneth Casey, who's a longtime leader and NOMA member. So just think of ways that we can support, the future by also celebrating the past, but also looking at things like succession planning for our longtime firm owners and just other touch points to celebrate legacy. This year we had an opportunity to rethink our mission statement, and we finalized this mission statement right after the murder of George Floyd. This had been in the works for a while, but the timing seemed right for us to really articulate, what we wanted to be about going forward. So NOMA's mission, rooted in a rich legacy of activism, is to empower our local chapters and membership to foster justice and equity in communities of color through outreach, community advocacy, professional development, and design excellence. So our previous mission is really more focused on championing diversity, and while that's still important, we wanted the new mission to really focus on that kind of social equity piece. But we can't drop the ball on diversity. And so one thing I often share with people is a quote that I heard at an event a while ago from Tanya Allen of the Skillman Foundation. She said that diversity is about counting the people and inclusion is about making the people count. And so, I challenge everyone to think about, how you're not just making sure you have a bunch of different people, in a room, but ensuring that everyone has a voice and they have agency to solve the complex problems that we're all trying to face together. And so one of the complex problems that we're trying to face is diversifying our profession. So we're, grateful to work with the AI Large Term Roundtable to basically put forward this pretty aggressive challenge, the 2030 Diversity Challenge, not unlike the Sustainability Challenge, but this is about diversifying our profession. And so of the 116,000 licensed architects, that I mentioned, with 2% being African-American and having been at that level for, basically the last 50 years that we've been counting, our goal at this point that we came together to create a few years ago is to double that number, or more than double that number, to get to 5,000 by 2030, which is really not that far from now. But to be successful, we have to be very intentional about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it's been said that well, the numbers don't matter if we're not creating equitable spaces, and we're not looking out for firm owners, and we're not doing the things that are really important to not just Black architects, but architects of color and frankly, the profession. And so my challenge to that, or my response to that would be, we can't get to 5,000 licensed Black architects if we don't really work on every portion of the kind of, the pipeline that goes from, access to leadership to legacy to, making sure that, people, can gain access to information about the profession, access to resources, developing as leaders and starting their own firms or leading existing firms. And then certainly succession planning is a big part of that. So, the 2030 Diversity Challenge is about doubling that number, but also ensuring that people really feel included, and they have a real sense of belonging in the profession to make it a sustainable goal. Some of the challenges that I think many of us are well aware is just, young kids don't often just get access to architects. And so that's part of what Project Pipeline is looking to do, to create that awareness. And then, making sure that the students remain connected and gain access to resources, and ultimately are incentivized to pursue architecture as a profession. So these are the things that that NOMA is really interested in helping to advance. And so one of the things about the 2030 Diversity Challenge is that because it takes on average about 12 years to become a licensed architect, we can't even count elementary and middle school students in our kind of target because they wouldn't be old enough yet. So we have to really focus on high school students, those who are in architecture school right now, and those who are on the path to licensure. And they may have been on the path for decades at this point, but how do we get them off the path and really into the exam seat so that they can finish and call themselves a licensed architect? So, we're actively thinking of ways to engage all those different components of the population. So that's what NOMA's been focused on, and we've been doing that with 35 professional chapters. Over 80 schools are represented throughout the country. When I took office at the beginning of 2019, we had 902 members, and my goal was to more than double that number to get to 2,000. And I'm really proud of the work that our board has done to exceed that goal by a little bit, to get to 2,086 at the end of the membership year. And so hoping that that momentum continues to build through Jason's term and Pascal's term after him. This year we had over 700 student members, which is really great. We love engaging with our young people to make sure that they feel that they are supported and have a path in the profession. And this year we had a really great record that we broke in for the annual conference. Last year we broke the record of having 1,200 people at our physical conference in Brooklyn, and we were a little bit concerned that the that the virus and going virtual would bring in less participation. We actually had more, so we had over 1,700 people join us online a couple months ago, and part thanks to the San Francisco chapter that curated that online conference after having to pivot from doing a lot of in-person planning. And so I'll leave with a couple of last thoughts. And the question that sometimes people ask, well, who should get involved with NOMA? Is it just for African American architects, or is it just for minorities? And but frankly, that's what part of why I named my platform All In for NOMA, all being inclusive as in all. So yes, you like me, yes, you like whoever you are. That's kind of the the call to action, that you get involved, and that you do it now, that you go to noma.net and join us, and poke around the website, ask questions. We're happy to get people engaged in this work. There's a lot to unpack. I know I showed a lot of really deep information, especially about the wealth gap and the health gap, and disparities in architecture. So not to stress anybody out, but like, somebody's got to work on this. So who better than you to work with all of us to make these things better. And so the last thing that I'll leave you with before I turn it over to Jason is just the charge to be brave. And so that's the call to action. This came out actually right as we announced our new mission statement, on May 31st, which was a few days after the murder of George Floyd. And so, we just ask everyone to be brave. And so that, so the acronym here is banish racism, reach out to those who are grieving, advocate for the disinherited, vote in every American election, which was obviously super important this year, and then engage each human that you meet as you want to be engaged. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Jason Pugh, who will be NOMA president in about 24 days. Jason, all you.
I love how Kim has kept a timeline. She knows exactly how many days she has had left in office to serve as a NOMA president. But no, thank you, Kim. I really appreciate it. Once again, my name is Jason Pugh. I'm a licensed architect and certified urban planner and an associate at Gensler's Chicago office. I am the incoming national NOMA president, with my term beginning in a few weeks on January 1st, 2021. It's truly been an honor to be a part of this amazing family we call NOMA now for well over 16 years. And my journey has blessed me with opportunities to serve the organization in multiple capacities at both the student and professional level. I was, as some on the call know, I was first introduced to NOMA as an undergraduate student at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where I helped resurrect the then dormant NOMA's chapter by serving as a student chapter president. Years later, as a professional, I would serve in a leadership capacity once again as the 2015-2016 president of the local NOMA chapter here in Chicago, which has grown to become one of the largest and most successful NOMA chapters in the country. And I've also served on a national executive board for well over 8+ years as the Midwest Regional University Liaison, a regional VP, and this past year under Kim's strong administration as our second in command president-elect. As I take this step forward to serve as the next NOMA president, I'd like to again first acknowledge the incredible work and accomplishments of my predecessor. I think everyone within NOMA and on this call, especially after looking at the presentation that Kim just shared with the stats, I think they would agree that Kim has done an amazing job steering this ship and leading the organization for the last 2 years during one of the most difficult and unprecedented moments, I think, in our history, in our country. And I'm just looking forward to building on the strong foundation she has solidified during her administration and expanding NOMA's list of sponsors, resources, programming, and allied partners to create more value in being a part of this organization. Kim, you can advance the slide. As we close out this unforgettable and unprecedented year and timidly step into 2021 with uncertainty, there is much to consider and reflect on as we look towards the next decade ahead. I think everyone would probably agree that 2020 was one for the record books. And we were all caught flat-footed in a way by an endless barrage of haymaker punches, in the swift form of the global pandemic, the resultant economic recession, divisive political rhetoric across this election year, and the civil unrest following the senseless murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and countless others. Our lives have been uprooted, our plans canceled and derailed. A large number of us have lost our jobs, and even worse, others have lost their lives and loved ones. We've struggled to catch our breath and bearings after each of these blindsided blows, only to be struck again with little recovery time in between. And this was not the year that we had planned. I think we all understand that. And for most, 2021 probably couldn't come soon enough. I was recently asked during an interview what makes me hopeful as I step into this new leadership role for NOMA, and what message could I share with our local chapter leadership base across the country? And as I thought about this, it was indeed a difficult question. It's hard to be hopeful while others around us are in so much pain. And it's hard to remain positive when there's so much uncertainty with no sight of reprieve along the horizon. So nonetheless, amidst the endless storm of 2020, I think there are a few shimmering rays of daylight that have pierced through the clouds. Signs that have left me hopeful, at least, that real change is near. The unity across the Black Lives Matter protests and demonstrations this summer has left me hopeful. We've seen focused coverage and support online and news media outlets, and for the first time in a long time, we've seen vocal stances on real policy change in the ways our communities are protected and served. I was amazed at the overall reach and diversity of the protesters in the streets this summer, Black and white, which is unlike anything that I've ever seen in my lifetime. The awakened self-reflection and discovery of the inequities across the building design industry has also left me hopeful. And the public stance and tall order initiatives outlined by large corporations, organizations, and firms like my own, like Gensler, to combat systemic racism and long-standing constructs of imbalance, power, and equity within our design industry has really left the potential to make real change, and has left me hopeful. The fast development of a vaccine to fight against this global coronavirus pandemic, which has infected millions and claimed too many lives over the last 10 months, leaves me reason to be hopeful. And with it, potential promise to bring back normalcy, whatever that may be, and bring back that into our lives and reunite physical connections with our family and our loved ones that we've been forced to be apart. And last but not least, despite our political party affiliations, honestly, the return of civility and unity, of truth and science and compassion and thoughtful leadership to the highest office in the land. This also leaves me hopeful that a torn, divided nation can come back together for the next few days ahead. Next slide, Kim. As Kimberly noted and shared earlier, she's created an amazing platform during her term as president with her 2019-2020 platform, All In for NOMA. Again, emphasizing all being an acronym for access, leadership, and legacy. And it was created by Kim and our current administration to promote more diversity and accessibility, cultivate new leaders amongst our ranks, and reinforce NOMA's rich history. The acronym ALL, as she mentioned, also used as a sign of inclusivity, a signal to all that we're stronger together than divided, especially now more than ever. And we need help from all people in the industry to make an impact and move the needle forward during this pivotal moment. One of my main goals for the next 2 years as the next NOMA president is to build upon these very same ideologies and the great work and progress Kim and the current national board and staff have accomplished during a tremendously impactful administration. Over the last few years, everyone has asked me, what my presidential platform will be and where do I plan to steer the organization. And I reassure everyone, and I've been consistent, that we most certainly will still be all in. We will carry forward the initiatives and programs created to date. Over the last year, Kim and I have worked in lockstep to ensure the new programs created during her administration will continue on and be expanded in creative ways to meet the needs of our valued members and reinforce the value in being a part of NOMA. We want to find ways to bolster the programs and initiatives launched by both the National Executive Board and our local national chapters to date, and ensure it dovetails with our expanded platform to educate, elevate, and empower our membership base and chapters across the country. Next slide. The education piece is there's multiple parts. First is the rebranding of Project Pipeline. Again, everyone knows Project Pipeline, the architectural summer camp. We want to find a way to really restructure and rebrand Pipeline so it's an overarching expansion and restructuring of the NOMA's Project Pipeline initiative, which is to include all K-12 higher education and young professional programming to produce more licensed architects. Being a proud HBCU alumni, I do want to find opportunities to create more value and focus and support for our 7 HBCU schools with accredited architectural programs. And I'm looking to create an HBCU advisory committee, which will be made up of both alumni, current faculty, and current students that will serve as an extension of the National Executive Board and help put forth some new initiatives, programming, and support and resources for our HBCU schools. And then, of course, tracking metrics towards licensure, establishing, I think, a formal system to track and measure our recruitment and member retention strategies to ensure that we're making quantifiable advancement towards increasing the number of minority architects. Kim has always mentioned, you can't manage what you can't measure. So it's critically important that we understand that these programs and initiatives that we have put forth and have launched are actually effective, and we're moving the needle and in the right direction. Next slide. The elevation piece is also multifaceted and, in part, still focused on increasing the number of licensed minority architects. NOMA, as a professional-based organization, our top priority will still continue to focus on increasing the number of licensed minority architects and representation across firm leadership and ownership. I need to have a stronger focus collectively with our leadership team to strengthen NOMA chapters at the local level, increasing the value of our NOMA membership by strengthening the programming, the engagement, and the resources of professional and student chapters at the local level. While Kim was very focused within her administration platform on bringing in new members, we are going to maintain that focus, but also zero in on the retention. Retention is critically important for our organization and will, I think, push us in leaps and bounds in really expanding our membership base. And then celebrate and promote our NOMA members, broadening, I think, our marketing and national spotlights to promote the accomplishments of our valued members and chapters, while celebrating, of course, our rich history and stories along the way. And then the last piece is the empowerment piece. Again, finding opportunities to create more economic opportunities for our members, provide focused resources and growth opportunities for both NOMA's legacy firms and young entrepreneurs, and expand the number of MBE and WBE firms within the organization. We plan to do this through a new program and initiative called Leverage Legacy, which will build upon the strong network and connections, portfolios of lessons learned by our legacy NOMA firms, and use it as a springboard to get new NOMA MBE firms off the ground. Because with me stepping in as, I believe, the first NOMA president to be both a licensed architect and a certified planner, I want to leverage my own connections across other allied organizations like APA and ULI, and find more opportunities to create strategic partnerships with these organizations as we expand our initiatives and also our membership base. And then last but not least, creating more advocacy for a just and equitable profession. Create a formal advocacy committee at the local national level that will help us fight against racism, discriminatory practices and policies, and push forward the advancement of minority architects within the building and design industry. So those are a quick overview of my platform stepping in for the next 2 years. I will say this, I don't think between Kimberly Dowdell as my predecessor and Pascal Sablon, who was recently elected as president-elect as my successor, I don't think I could be more perfectly positioned for success and growth within the organization between these two amazing women. So super excited to still have Kim in my corner. I know you're counting down the days till January 1st, but you still have 2 years as the immediate past president. Pascal is stepping up as president-elect, and I'm looking forward to working with not only the national board and the oncoming chairs, but also our local chapter leadership for both the students and our professional members to really get these programs and initiatives off the ground in a more meaningful and impactful way. So with that, thank you again for having Kimberly and I. We appreciate the time and opportunity to share our thoughts around justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and how we see this transforming and moving forward in the years to come. Thank you.